We'll start off by congratulating you on 30 years of the Killjoys.
Thank you, John.
Is there a key to the longevity of the group?
I think there was never any sort of huge expectation within the industry. We never had that big hit that we had to follow up. We got a lot of Triple J airplay, and that sort of continued through the 90s, which was really good. I think, never having to follow up a big hit is a big plus, because I think there's huge expectation when there's a big commercial hit. And I think Anna and I, as a songwriting partnership, have always enjoyed doing what we do, so there was never a reason to really stop either. Sometimes, we might have to do half a dozen gigs in a year, and they might be pretty laid-back acoustics, but, it's always remained that's there as part of our creative output.
Yeah. Talk about your band prior to the Killjoys, Wild Science, and how did that differ musically from the sound you'd end up making with the Killjoys?
Look, it was quite different. It was led by a singer-songwriter, Buzz Hiscock, who was fantastic. But I think as his songwriting developed, he was leaning more towards a sort of a birthday party, Seaview Ballroom sort of sound. And Anna joined the band when I was already in it, and that came with sort of a bit of a package of management and stuff like that. And I think management's ideas were pretty sort of poppy, but Buzz was leaning more towards a sort of a darker sound. So he went on to do that with Warren, the keyboard player from the band, and they had a song on one of the Ruart compilations, and got signed to that. And Anna and I sort of went on to start the Killjoys and sort of pursue the songwriting that we'd started to do together. But I just uncovered some old reel-to-reel tapes, actually, that I got baked, and I did a transfer of a really early Wild Science recording. I sent it to Buzz, and he got quite a kick out of hearing what happened all those years ago in an overnight session at Platinum Studios.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
When you first formed the Killjoys with Anna, was there a blueprint for the sound that you wanted to make?
There wasn't really. I think we were influenced by a lot of English pop music, and when I say pop music, I mean probably more the English version of rock and roll that was sort of a bit more Aztec Camera and Elvis Costello and bands like that were very melody based, and I suppose early on, I was bringing songs to the project and Anna was bringing songs to the project, and we sort of discovered that I was better at doing the music and she was better at doing the words. So that sort of locked in a bit of a sound that's remained constant to us. And I think, there was a definite shape that we were looking at. We were looking for a marimba player to join. And that was probably, influenced by bands like The Cure and other sort of, English pop acts that were using different elements. But Caroline, who we were introduced to through our drummer, who was at the College of the Arts at the time, was studying jazz. She didn't have a marimba, but she was a tuned percussion player, and she had a vibraphone, and she came along and had a play with us, and it seemed to really sit nicely with the sort of acoustic pop sounds that we were doing that gave it a bit of an edge.
Right, so you weren't actually seeking a vibraphone player, just having you knew one, and it just sort of worked that way.
Exactly, yeah. We were actually looking at adding a marimba. Marimbas are hugely expensive because they don't sort of make really cheap versions of them. They're just sort of orchestral instruments. But yeah, Caroline had a vibraphone, and that, it brought in the rhythmic and melodic elements that we were looking for in a marimba, but it just gave it a different sound again.
Although you and Anna have been the mainstays of the band through the years, you've had a lot of lineup changes along the way. Has that been unsettling at any time at all?
Not really. I think pretty early on, very early on, when we were sort of getting signed to record companies and doing stuff overseas and everything, there seemed to be a lot of urgency on timing. It was always, getting a single out by Christmas and getting this record out, and whether it's going to get pushed by the record company and everything like that. And the first couple of lineup changes were quite, I guess, a big shock to the band, because we'd sort of been working our way up with the one lineup. But I think pretty early on we discovered, particularly when we moved overseas and we were sort of doing, the stints for sort of 6 months and 4 months and 3 months, that as people's, expectations of the band and their lives changed, then we were sort of replacing members with friends, really, and guided by that rather than necessarily, replacing a vibraphone player with another vibraphone player. And after a couple of years, it was tricky finding something for the vibraphone to do in every song. So Caroline was playing a bit of piano accordion and so forth. And when she left and we were heading overseas, Penny joined us for a while, and she was sort of, playing electric guitar and piano accordion and mandolin. And that was sort of, helped guide where we headed with a few things as well. So, yeah, it was I think at a time where we saw a lot of bands with lineup changes struggling when they were doing overseas touring, particularly the long hauls, and where personalities really came into it. And, once you're away with someone for 6 months, you really sort of discover what annoys you about them. It was really sort of, I think, advantageous replacing band members with people that we got along really well with, and we knew what they were like as players, and sort of, I guess it helped mould our sound along the way. We had Gary Aspinall playing lead guitar with us for quite a while, and he was a beautiful guitarist that was more in the style of the Flying Nun New Zealand bands, and that brought a different edge to the band during that time as well, and I think just managing those assets and helping them really work for you helped form the band's sound, and rather than sort of, expect it to be how it used to be and then get really disappointed.
Now, you got a lot of notoriety for the debut album Ruby, even an Ahri Award. Did that put a weight of expectation on you for following releases?
It did a bit. I think the record company expected us to then, go that next step into commercial radio land from Triple J. We were pretty lucky with timing in that when our first single came out from that album, Triple J was just starting to go nationally, and by the time our album came out, they'd pretty much gone nationally. So having 3 or 4 songs on high rotation over the length of the album or the life of the album allowed us to, go to Hobart and Perth and do extensive touring, and people knew our songs, and that was really fantastic timing, and it was really great support by the ABC. But of course, on a normal sort of career trajectory now, that would be sort of, the peak, and then you'd go overseas and do the same thing over there. But in those days, the commercial airplay still had a lot of power in, breaking new acts and so forth. So, there was a real expectation for us to go that extra level. But I'm not sure who out of those sorts of really got to do that weren't, the different sort of commercial pub rock bands. I know that, the Falling Joys had a hit with Locket, which was a fantastic single. But they're the only ones I can think of. Even the Clouds were pretty, predominantly Triple J bands and didn't sort of make it across. It did. The Ahri Award and the notoriety from that first album really did sort of set us up for our career, which was fantastic and gave us a great sort of great bedrock of people around the country that knew our music.
Now, the award gave you notoriety for some wrong reasons too, because no sooner did you have the award, but you lost it in Sydney Harbour. What are your memories of that incident?
That's right, yeah. Look, it was a fantastic time. The Ahri Awards were much more relaxed and awards-based and speech-based. It was at Darling Harbour, but it was sort of much more like the Brownlow, and everyone was sitting around big round tables and eating and drinking while the award ceremony went on. And now it's just pretty much a TV show. If you get up to go to the loo, they put a seat warmer in there so it doesn't look empty. It was kind of a bit more loose, and the speeches would get a bit more adventurous. And our award was quite late, and I'd been sort of eating and drinking, and the adrenaline gets you through, and we got up and made a speech, and everything was fantastic. And then after we sat back down, it sort of all hit me a bit, and I was a bit drunk, and Caroline took the award from me and said, "No, you've been drinking too much. I'll look after this." But because we won, we got invited to the good parties, and all the good parties were on boats. And as we were getting onto one of the boats on the gangplank, her sort of high heels slipped, and the Ahri Award went in, and the bouncer said, "That wasn't a stubby, was it?" And that was that. But it did get it, it got us in the news at MTV and in the papers and stuff like that. And there were rumours around that we'd sort of thrown it in as some sort of protest about the commercial nature of the awards, but that wasn't really right. And in those days, the best independent release was quite a small category, really, compared to how it is now, where a lot of the big records are independent releases.
Mm. You did get a replacement for it, though, didn't you?
We did get a replacement. We've lost that as well.
Oh no!
Yeah, it was sort of cycling around the members of the band at the time, and we sort of lost track of it. No one could really own up to who had it when we lost track of it. But when we discovered later on that you could actually get reproductions, which often happened when there were sort of arguments within the band who got to keep the aria, you could order replica copies of it, which was pretty good.
Mm. Now, the second album, Craig Leon produced that. He'd worked with a wide variety of artists. Was there anything in particular about him that made him the right fit for the Killjoys?
There was. The record company had this great, and it was probably on a floppy disk, a great computer program that allowed you to feed in the early 90s, artists, records, songs, producers, and it would give you a bit of a family tree. We put in the Go-Betweens and some of our favourite Go-Betweens songs, and Craig Leon popped up, and from that family tree we saw that he'd worked extensively with The Fall, which was really cool, and going back further in time, he'd worked with Blondie and the Ramones, and made some of those great pop songs for the Go-Betweens, and we sent out a bunch of demos. It was, again, it was a different era, and the record company would send us up to the ABC studios with Chris Thompson, who was a fantastic producer in his own right, and we made good quality demos that we sent out to people, and we got a series of responses back from those. Some of the big producers whose work we really enjoyed, came back with huge sort of quotes. But Craig Leon came back with really good insight into the songs, and he was willing to shift around and help the budget work to make an Australian budget, make a really good record. We were lucky that he didn't really enjoy long-haul flights. He lived in the Cotswolds out of Oxford, and there was a really great studio there called Chipping Norton Studios, where Baker Street was by Jerry Rafferty was made, and a few other hits, and some of the great English bands had recorded. It was in an old school, so it slept about 26 people left over from the heady days of the 70s when you just bring all your mates to recordings for months on end. And that was near his house, so he sort of made the budget work, so it was actually cheaper for us to go to England and record and stay there for 5 weeks than for him to come out here and put him up and record here. So that was really fantastic for us. So everything about the fit with Craig worked because he seemed to be putting in the effort to make it work, which was fantastic. And we went on to do another EP with him, Love and Uncertainty, at a place called Chapel Studios on the East Coast as well. And, what I got to learn from working with Craig and the engineers that he worked with, it were just absolutely world-class. Was absolutely invaluable, and they were all very generous with their knowledge, so they were happy to have me sitting there at the desk just watching what they're doing and asking the odd question. It was really helpful when we sort of came back and lived through the period where record companies would say, no, here's an 8-track, make your own demos, and let's put a single out and you provide us with B-sides and stuff like that, where that was where I really started to cut my teeth on production.
Well, away from the band, you have kept pretty busy through the years with production work, running your own studio, composition work as well. I guess when you get back to working with the band, it must almost be like a welcome break from all that to just be playing in a band again. It
is, and it's different because it's very relaxed and it's very comfortable, and even doing acoustic gigs, quite often we'll do them. Anna, myself, and Dave, the drummer, and some of those old songs are just so comfortable that they can sort of take on a new life when we do them in different ways, acoustic and so forth. So yeah, it's very fulfilling as far as your own creativity is concerned, to be playing your own songs and performing them. And the same as writing new songs and getting back in the studio. It's really great, sort of comfortable thing that's different to the other stuff that I do. Yeah, for sure.
Working with other artists as a producer, how big advantage have you found it being a musician yourself, being able to relate to them in that recording situation?
Very much so. I think, there are sort of two types of producers these days. There are producers that come from, a songwriting and musicianship perspective, like Joe Henry, for example, who's made some, amazing albums with incredible artists and heritage artists. And then there's sort of the, more technically based producers that have come from being engineers. And I think because I basically went from the point where I had a 4-track that the cat pissed on, it became a 1-track, so I bought an 8-track. And from then on, I was on a constant journey of using gear to the point where I started to get a bit frustrated by its limitations, and I'd be wanting something bigger and more professional. So I've sort of been constantly on that path and doing the engineering side of things, but always writing songs and composing and so forth. So being able to come at it from both ends is really fantastic. But working with some incredible songwriters over the years, working with the Black Eyed Susans and with Archie Roach and Gurrumul Yunupingu and Liz Stringer and people like that, when you sit down with them and look at the songs and pull them apart and put them back together and stick your head inside their creativity, that's incredibly enriching for your own songwriting as well, to see how other people do things compared to the comfortable way you may have slipped into doing things. And watching Liz Stringer play me one of her songs and then working out that she's actually doing about 4 different guitar parts, and you can split that up into other parts and create this lush bed out of it is really eye-opening to the way you look at what other people might see as a guitar part.
So looking back through the Killjoys catalogue, which album do you feel best captures the band as the band you wanted it to be?
I don't know about that, because the original lineup that did the EP Audrey, we did that recording ourselves, and we sort of got in a friend of a friend who worked at the ABC who brought in a bit of gear, and we set up the rehearsal room and that we'd set up and sort of recorded it. But it all happened in a blur over an Easter, and we sort of got it all down, and then I sort of listened back to it and thought, oh, one song's really way too fast, and this really didn't capture that. So even though that EP seemed to be the one that got on the radio and got us interest in public radio and so forth, I was never really that happy with it. So we sort of went in and made Ruby with Mark Woods at Sing Sing, and that really, to me, was much more what I thought we should sound like. But then from there, I really enjoy some of the albums that we've done, over the last 20 years, after that first 10 years of the band, and where we've been able to sit down and be a bit more atmospheric with some of the stuff. So I sort of enjoy it all. Sometimes you look back and say, I wish I'd have done that differently. And even on our last album, Pearl, we ummed and ahed about one song that, in retrospect, might have been a better body of work had we left it off. But overall, I still get sort of a bit shocked when I listen back to our own records and think, wow, I forgot about that. That was really fantastic. Which sounds a bit conceited, but I think it's, when you're working on your own stuff, you tend to sort of finish it and put it out and move on. And it's really great to look back sometimes, but it's difficult. I still think that album, Ruby, resonated with people as an introduction to our sound that got, a lot of airplay and stuff like that. So, there were people where we played at someone's wedding, and then we played at their 10th anniversary, and then we played at their 20th anniversary. And I think, there are people like that where that album was a really big part of their listening around that time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the album that still defines our sound, even though, we've done lots of records since that we're really happy with.
I've seen the Pearl album referred to as a sequel to Ruby. Certainly the title suggests that. Did you go into that project with that in mind?
We did, and even though the sounds on it aren't necessarily a sequel to it, some of the lyrical content is reflective on, the journey that's been since then. And certainly we made a conscious effort, or I made a conscious effort, to include everyone who had been in the band on the record, to the point where, I think I went up to Darwin and did some double bass with Michael Honan, and down to Tasmania and did some vibes with Caroline. So it was actually a point where I thought, right, it's time to consolidate everyone who'd been in and acknowledge their input into the band. And we definitely wanted to, because it had been out of print for so long, because the distributor who used to do it wasn't in business anymore. It was kind of made sense to re-release it in a double CD package, to make that available again too.
The songwriting partnership between you and Anna, is that the procedure there pretty much stayed the same through the years, or is it a little bit different now?
It's a little bit different now. I think it's a bit more fluid now. We can work from a few different angles. I used to pretty much write all the music and Anna would write the words, and I'd sort of give her the music and then she'd come back with the words and the song would be finished. But there's much more to-ing and fro-ing now. So, and because I've got my own studio, Anna will come over, and she was over here yesterday, and we were just sitting through some of the recordings we've done, discussing them and reflecting on their worth and which ones we'd pursue and which ones we'd let by the wayside and so forth. And I think there it overlaps a lot more with our discussions about lyrics and music. And there's one song on this new album that we're doing that's that I'd written completely, that Anna was, really happy with, just to go with. And sometimes she'll text me some phrases and lyrics, and I'll send her music with the odd phrase and stuff like that. So we sort of bounce off different steps now, which is really great. There was one song on this new album that we looked at, and I'd sent her basically an internet link to this beautiful letter that Leonard Cohen had written to the Marianne from So Long Marianne.
Oh, yeah.
That fantastic instance where her daughter had been in contact with him to say that she's nearing the end of her illness. And it was a beautiful, beautiful letter. So we thought that was worthy of sort of jumping off as far as, a point of using some of those phrases and just sticking with that sentiment. We've been, I guess, looking a lot at that aspect of life, and my father passed away at the end of 2016, and I think for the first time I was around toward the end, and it was fantastic. We got to spend really good time together, and I was around for the funeral, and then I was back on tour with Archie Roach, and I was finding myself, a lot of his gigs are very civilised hours, and I might be back in the hotel by 9:30 or 10 o'clock. So I was finding myself, writing a lot of songs in the hotel room and sending Anna a lot of songs and talking about concepts that we were looking at. So that seemed to fit in and was just a different way of stepping off a sentiment to start a song.
So this new album coming out to coincide with the 30th anniversary of the band, who have you got playing on it?
A lot of it is Anna and myself. Mm-hmm. Dave, our drummer's on it, and I'm at the point where I'm getting extra bits from everyone, and I'll get Penny in because she's been playing with us lately, and we'll sort of dress it up a bit. I'm about to head off to Canada for a month, so I'm taking it with me on the laptop, and we'll be doing lots of bits and pieces while we're here. But we're also just at the point where we're starting to look at how it comes out, and we're toying with the idea of putting out sort of an anthology of some of our material all put together, and having the new material linked with that as well, but that's still in discussion.
Oh, wonderful. And plans for any 30th anniversary type gigs?
Yeah, we've got a date locked in on the 31st of August at the Spotted Mallard in Melbourne, which is a fantastic venue, where we're going to launch. There's a single basically ready to go that's got a film clip. mastered and everything, and that's just sitting there ready to go. So we're going to launch that on the 31st of August, and then that will develop into the second half of this year, where we'll put out the album, or an anthology with the album, or an anthology with new material blended in.
Brilliant. Fantastic. We look forward to all that. Hey, Craig, thanks so much for taking time out to have a chat with us, and congratulations once again on 30 years of one of Melbourne's much-loved bands.
Thank you, John.
We look forward to the new stuff later in the year.
Cheers.
All the best. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.